Good afternoon, everyone. News headlines about North Korea giving up their nuclear program. This is directly related to the grand solar minimum. I am going to spell it out the best way I can here. Worst drought in 16 years in North Korea. We can predict that it's going into a drought mode just as sunspots were repeating in the 1970s. North Korea grain imports tripled from last year. Hungry North Korean soldiers looking for food can't feed them. We're 20 million people going to walk across these two borders into China and South Korea. They're in another famine and the soldiers won't fight. Would we see signs of the intensifying grand solar minimum? Jinshitan fishing port, northeast China. All-time record ice, unusual to say the least. Where's that located? Oh yeah, right near Dalian. See North Korea to the east there? Looking at the collapse of the Chinese dynasties during grand solar minimums, can we match this up with Korea? Of course we can. Goryeo Kingdom takes over at the end of the 5 dynasties collapse and in itself collapses during the Sporter minimum and also the collapse of the Yuan dynasty in China. Late antique little ice age, 535 AD. Wait a second, the Middle East got wetter and the Gaia Confederacy collapses in the same years. We know China is going to go offline in these grain growing regions already based on past cycles. This includes North Korea. The intensification of the grand solar minimum, here it is. It's going to intensify through 2018 up to 2021 before we get any type of respite. And now you will understand why North Korea is at the bargaining table, because they are starving. We're heading into a grand solar minimum. These soldiers are done fighting, they're starving, and this is the reason. The media doesn't want to talk about grand solar minimums, but I'm going to try to weave these two together so we all get a really good picture of how politics is now playing into repeating 400-year cycles. And this video is brought to you by TrueLeafMarket.com, heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet. I've linked this below along with everything I'm about to cover in this video so you can do your own research. The idea from this video actually came from my dad and myself talking about North Korea, and he was asking about how does the grand solar minimum fit into this, do you think? So we talked for about half an hour and then here we go, this is the video. We've seen the leaders of the Koreas come meet at the demilitarized zone over the last couple weeks. President Trump's going to head out there in June. We see North Korea everywhere in the media suddenly ready to disarm their nuclear program. Xi Jinping, second surprise visit, really makes no sense suddenly why they're going to do this unless we know there's an amplification coming of the grand solar minimum. Their crops are going to be lost even further, and their people are going to start walking over the borders into these other countries, and now it becomes an international incident. And the humanitarian relief is going to be something on the scale that's going to dwarf those African famines that you saw back in the 1980s. North Korean grain production declined 2% during 2017. Also, North Korean grain imports have more than tripled. So you have to realize that countries around the world as producers are starting to decline in their yields. Now, that's fine for now. We still have enough grain on this planet to feed everybody. But when we get down 3-4 more years out into this timeline of the grand solar minimum intensification, they're not going to be able to import this much. There's going to be many, many countries across the planet scrambling to find imports for lost production in their own countries. This is a microcosm of what is to come globally. UN agency reports worst drought 16 years in North Korea. And now North Korean officials are raiding homes of food to feed the army. And this is all green-lighted by the government and the very top officials. So we're looking at droughts, we're talking about droughts. We're also going to talk about the North Korean army, who is also very malnourished. They're barely even able to train because there's not enough food to go around. So they were given leave to go ransack farmers' homes, steal cash, loot grain to keep the army up and running. Now this is some unverified pictures of North Korean soldiers out in the field actually looking for corn. Like I say, I can't verify if this photo is authentic or not, but I found it in the news feed through the Daily North Korea. Also, an enormous amount of headlines coming out about hungry North Korean soldiers 1.2 million troops, but they can't even be fed properly. So you have to realize the state of North Korea, they had a famine from 1994 to 1998. Now, most of these soldiers that are there were kids. They absolutely remember this famine. The numbers are anywhere from 250,000 to 3.5 million people starved. So these soldiers are going into famine 2.0, and they know there's a way out. They know they can walk over the borders. They know the world has opened up greatly since the 1990s when everything was ruled with an iron fist, including China. They were nowhere near economically open or capitalistic open or whatever you want to call their form of government over there. Not even close. And even what you consider South Korea was under semi-martial law at that time. So much has changed in the way that these soldiers can now escape. And if these soldiers abandon their posts and they start walking over the borders, you're going to have 25 million people streaming across two different borders into China and South Korea at the exact same time looking for food. Now this all depends on, can you peg whether the drought is going to continue or is it going to alleviate? I'm going to bring you over here to shift a peak in summer monsoon rainfall over Korea and the association with El Nino Southern Oscillation. Now they're finding that as in the 1970s, the peak in the monsoon is shifting much later in the year from, let's say, July into late August. Also, the amount of rainfall that's going to accompany these shifts is present right here in the graphs. I circled it in the yellow circle so you can easily see where the 1970s was. They dropped off moderate to heavy rainfalls, which was great for agriculture, and then they came into 3 to 5 year drought. Now you have to understand this in the 1970s, low solar activity. And when we look at the sunspot activity, 1970s, where we can see it and where we are going into incredibly low solar activity, a grand solar minimum, something we haven't even seen in hundreds of years, you can expect that the drought is going to continue and even intensify in that area because China experienced the same thing every single collapse of their emperors. The dynasties collapsed because they couldn't feed their people, and it was in a drought situation in northeast China. Well, let's take a look at the shift here. I circled in yellow again. The bottom yellow, B, where the box is, this was the change in precipitation 1954 to 75 in the month of August. And the top right box, C, this is where the July flip was in precipitation. So think about it. If we're going from like it was 1954, 1975, 76, 77, and we're rolling into 2002, look at the difference in precipitation that they're going to receive. It looks like it's going to continue with the drought. Now, when we look at the population of North Korea at 25 million, those 250,000 or 3.5 million people doesn't even register a blip on the demographic chart here of North Korea. Whatever the number was, it's indiscernible on the long-term trend. But the thing is, every government on the planet is trying to keep your eyes off this grand solar minimum. That's why the news is just getting so intense, so insane. It's almost bizarro land of what you see in the news feeds coming across. They have to distract you. Now, the very last thing anybody wants to have to cover is 25 million people walking over the DMZ, which is a landmine-ridden catastrophe waiting to happen. And as those landmines are cleared, when they get in down to Seoul, and then they have to go up into China as well, look where they're going to walk. This topographic map is very easy to see where the human stream of river of exodus will go to. They're going to have to cover this. And there are going to be a lot of questions asked as to what's happening with their agriculture. And you can only blame a dictatorship so much on it because they do have modern machinery up there. They've been importing seed. They're redoing their canals. They've been really working very hard at revamping their agriculture for the last 3 years, and it still has not even made a dent into their production. Now let's take a look at the grand solar minimum global weather pattern shifts that are going to amplify as we move into 2019, 2020, 21. So all the strange weather you're seeing right now is just this little tiny uptick where we're going from the yellow box into the green box. Now I'm firmly saying that the strange weather and volcanic eruptions are really going to intensify as we get into July. And through the end of the year, you're going to see things that are going to absolutely boggle your mind, and you will think that's impossible what you're seeing. But please remember, that is nothing. That split and widening in the magnetic fields of the sun that's going to affect our magnetosphere and our planet's weather systems is just going to keep widening out to 2021. When we get out to 2021, there is going to be massive crop losses globally. along with temperature drops. Now, the reason I would say this is a temperature reconstruction of the Maunder minimum. So we know at least back in the 1640, 1670, up to, they say, 1710, exactly where the temperatures dropped and how much. So here we are. That dark blue, that's right over Heilongjiang. That's right over North Korea. That's right over the exact same areas where the grain growing belts are in China, where they are in Canada and the United States and Europe and Russia. There are going to be losses of grain. Absolutely. I am pegging it, along with others, where the crop production is going to be lost with the wheat first, up in Heilongjiang and parts of Inner Mongolia, and down in Henan and Anhui province as well. Look for at least equal or reduced yields coming out of China this year in these specific areas. And then you say, well, it's just maybe something that you're guessing at. Well, we're looking for these trends of unusual cold events that were talked about and written about in logs, diaries, paintings, lithographs, and the bevy of information of records kept, at least in China, which was very good. I mean, incredible record keeping, along with the Arab traders as well. Jinshitan, this is in northeast China. They call this remarkable. They don't even have words for this in their news reports. They're like, it's such a rare event that it would freeze this much in a deep water port coming into Dalian. So let's take a look at some of the images here. This is just this year, back in January, rolling into the first week of February. Even when they took drone footage, you couldn't even see the end of the ice or the boats frozen. There were literally thousands and thousands of fishing boats trapped in this ice. CGTN put it at hundreds, but eventually when they did the counting, it was thousands. I've linked everything below. You can definitely backtrack all this. I hope you do, so you can really see the true picture of where we're going. And you might ask, Jinshitan, where is that? Well, I circled it in purple right next to Dalian Port. And over to the east, you see North Korea. Now here's the thing. When these people come streaming out of North Korea, they're going to go right up into Shenyang. And where are you going to have an additional 10 million people just walking around this area? Where are they going to end up? This is going to be a humanitarian crisis for China as well. They can't have that because a lot of people like myself are going to keep reporting on it and pointing back to, let's see the climate changes during the last grand solar minimum in China that are also related to the monsoon. The same exact thing that's going to be causing and intensifying the drought on a smaller, 50-year period in North Korea. Let's look back 400 years in time, and can we see the oscillations in the monsoon that cause droughts and crop losses in China? Here we go. I know it's in black and white, but this is the shift in precipitation based on the Southeast Asian monsoon. That big island at the very bottom is Hainan. Island off to the east or to the right there, that's Taiwan. A little bit better gauge here. You can really see how these shifts are, especially at the 500 millibar level in the atmosphere. You can see how it correlates with either drought conditions or more heavy rain conditions. Color, it's much easier to see these shifts where they're going on. I'm going to do another whole video just based on why the soy wars are going on in China as well. On shorter time frames, we see the summer monsoon in India also showing drought and flood patterns that are recurring. This can be brought out to the 400-year cycle as well. Talked about Southeast Asia there for a second. You can see the movement and the changes in precipitation on longer, multi-decade or multi-century cycles. We can see the same thing. They know where the intertropical convergence zone moved to when the grand solar minimums are intensifying. And also this is a different look going forward into solar cycle 25 and 6, the amount of activity on our sun. As you can see, it's going to decrease down to almost nothing. So I'm going to take you on a magic carpet journey back 1500 years to the Arabian Peninsula, which received more rainfall and more vegetation grew. They believe this is one of the factors of the expansion of the Arab traders and Islam. Roman Empire collapsed at that same time. We're talking about 535 AD. And if we bring down into a little shorter time frame here of just 200 years of temperature records, collapse of the Northern Wei Dynasty. You'll see that really dark red where it says Russian Altai Mountains. Guarantee they lost crops up there as well. There were three major volcanic eruptions, 536, 540, 547. This correlates directly with increased galactic cosmic rays exciting silica-rich magma chambers. There's an enormous amount of peer-reviewed research out there on the net about this. And those links that I put below for the different reports, online libraries, etc., just go ahead and put in cosmic rays and volcanoes when you're doing some searching inside there. This for sure had the effect of a year without a summer, probably longer, 3-4 years. So you could just imagine that crops were not growing well. And then we find for sure that the Eastern Roman Empire collapsed at that same time. Food supplies were low and major famines. They called it the late antique little ice age. So again, I brought up a little bit different bar graph to overlap on the temperature chart here. So you can see where those blue lines are. I want to bring you around 540. So you can see right there where that temperature dip around 540-ish, 545. And then we find right in Korea, the history of Korea, I highlighted in blue. The Gaia Confederacy collapsed at 562, right in that exact same time frame. So there is a direct effect in Korea as well, on the peninsula, North, South Korea, and Heilongjiang in that northern China area. They're all lumped together. Also, when I was doing some planetary geometry, I put this as a comparison of where we are going to be with the 4 gas giants coming up into 2023 and 2024, and where we were back in 578 and 579 AD, about 1500 years ago. And you might say, well, you're just showing us some fancy charts with planets. Well, let's look back at the GISP. This is the Greenland Ice Project. This goes back 1,000 years, little ice age, right around 1700. LIA is the blue, and then the MWP is the medieval warming period, where it's actually warmer than today, about 1,000 years ago. So then I thought, wow, I wonder if I can overlay the collapse of the Chinese dynasties on top of this chart, and this is what I did. And anywhere you see a colored bar was the collapse of a dynasty. The mandate from heaven from the emperor was a revolt due to, yeah, you got it, drought, famine, civil unrest, and just not enough food. So then I thought, well, okay, there has to be some measurement here of the kingdoms as well that are in Korea. Let's match them up. Kingdom of Goryeo starts in 918 and then ends in 1392. Well, what was around the year 1000 coming into that time of 918? Oh, the full collapse of the 5 dynasties. So then I looked a little further down the timeline there and I said 1392, what was going on then? Oh, the Yuan dynasty collapsed as well. Mega drought happened at that same exact time. So then moving forward, who took over after the, I guess the reassemblance, if you will? It was a full societal reset button, just like we're experiencing or going to experience right now with our food and global crop production. The kingdom of the great Joseon, 1392, picked up the pieces where the last collapsed dynasty left off. Now coming in at 1897, that's more on the political end there. But you can see the infighting when you go back and look at the history of Korea, the infighting, especially around the 1600s. It wasn't a full collapse, but it was just warlord and kingdom within kingdoms fighting each other. So let's come up to the modern Kim dynasty, and I wanted to bring you to the reason that the North Koreans are at the bargaining table and the world's working with them to try to, don't say anything about the grand solar minimum crop losses. We don't want to spook the world. The economic system's in jeopardy if everybody spooks at the same time. They all pour their money out of the bank to get ready for the coming changes in the next 4 years. Looking at the solar activity, looking at the Kim dynasty, he's finished. According to history, his reign ends right now. The soldiers are about to revolt. They're going to do a mass exodus, leading the way for the rest of the citizens to pour across these borders. And the amplification timeline is moving right along with this. It is so quirky that it cannot even be coincidental that we're moving into this mega amplification at the end of this year, into these next 2 years where crops are going to be lost globally, and suddenly North Korea's at the bargaining table. Impossible that it's a coincidence. Thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of the video, and every time you see something about a North Korean headline, now you can pin it together. And especially with China and the soya and sorghum wars that are going on with the trade tariffs, it's going to be like this. Because this is going on and food prices start rising around our globe, And especially if it's related to soy or sorghum, you could just say, well, that's expected. There's a trade war going on. When in actuality, everybody's working together to try to mask the effects of what's about to hit your world. And mine as well. This is the reason I do the channel. We all need to be informed together. These are the changes that are here. They're not coming anymore. They are here and intensifying. We need to work together to adopt new growing strategies globally. It can be done with our new tech, and this is just one instance of history repeating itself. And please remember to visit the sponsor for this video, trueleafmarket.com, heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet. You need to learn how to grow something, anything. You need to practice right now because these changes are here and they're really going to be pronounced at the end of the year going into 2019, and you will see this firsthand what I'm talking about.